for all the people out there with a dream that just want to be seen. Yeah, my dream's bigger than the average.
Welcome to the third episode of the Be Seen podcast. Today we've got Steve Longi, producer of Hacksaw Ridge, an incredibly talented man. Steve, thank you ever so much for giving us your time today.
Oh, thank you for those very kind words. Appreciate it.
It's my honor. Thank you. Steve, please share with us your journey. It's phenomenal.
My journey. God, when I was 11 years old, I wanted to make movies. And I just knew it. It was just in my blood, right? And I think I was very fortunate because I think a lot of young people sometimes don't know what they want to do with their life. And, it wasn't that I necessarily woke up when I was 11, I said I want to be a film producer, but, I knew I wanted to be involved in the entertainment business in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So when I was a little kid, I used to make, this is, back in the 80s, 70s and the 80s, I'm a little older now, but I had a Super 8 film camera that my dad bought for me, and I used to make disaster movies in my backyard. I used to light things on fire and film them. I used to get the kids from around the neighborhood to come in and star in them. I used to build sets in my garage. That was my sound stage, was my garage. And I used to give tours of my back lot, which is my backyard. We had woods, and we had a kind of a big backyard in suburban New Jersey where I grew up. And so I'd give tours of my back lot on my bicycle. So I was a little movie mogul when I was 11 years old. I actually had a subscription of Variety, which of course everybody knows today is one of the most read entertainment publications. It's kind of an industry, insider type of publication. Back then, it was a real insider type of publication. And I had a subscription. It cost $100 for a subscription of Weekly Variety, and they deliver it once a week to my home in New Jersey. And I had no idea what any of it meant. I mean, it was written in all this, very specific kind of showbiz language, right? And but I would go through it, and I would try to read it and try to understand it. But from an early age, I had wanted to be in the film business. So it was just something that I'd always thought about, dreamed about. And when I was finally of age, I think I was 21, and I was planning a move to the West Coast because I knew, to get to break into Hollywood, you have to actually relocate to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I planned on doing for many years. And for about a good year or two, I saved up all my money and planned my trip and drove across country to Los Angeles and found a place to live, and had no idea what I was doing, had no idea what I needed to be doing, but at least I was in California and I was a lot closer to where I wanted to be. And then from there, it took me some years to sort of get my footing and, figure it out. And I started, my entree into the business was as an intern. So I started working for free. And this is how I got a lot of experience, how I made a lot of connections, how I learned sort of, what the different routes, to enter the business were. So, there's production and then there's development. So there's like these two tracks that you can go on. And again, didn't really know which track I wanted to go on, but I had done a little bit of production work. I was sort of dabbling as a production assistant. I always think that's a good thing for people to do when they start. But I started on the development track, working for what we call a creative producer. A creative producer is somebody who finds the screenplay, develops the screenplay by hiring maybe another writer, maybe hiring and attaching a director who oversees a rewrite of the script. Creative producers take the material to financiers and to studios and distributors. So I got my start with a creative producer, and I started to learn the business from that perspective, and I got on that track. So that was essentially, and in a nutshell, my how I got my start.
What is the difference between the different types of producers that many aspiring screenwriters or filmmakers or those heading into the industry actually confuse?
there is a new thing which is called the PGA mark. And you'll see this on credits, and you'll see the producers that receive the PGA mark from the Producers Guild are the producers who were the creative producers who came on the film or the project in the beginning of the process, saw the entire process through, and by determination of the Producing Guild, they received the mark, the PGA mark. Now, anybody can be given a producer credit. There are no rules to that. Some people are given an executive producer credit. Sometimes the executive producer credit will go to a financier. Sometimes it'll go to somebody who just acquired the rights and then made a deal with a creative producer who then took it the rest of the way. It could be a variety of different people. All right. It could be the writer sometimes can get an executive producer credit. So there really isn't a real sort of specific definition of an executive producer. The producer, which is the most sought after credit, is generally the one who's going to get the PGA mark. And that's generally the person who's on from the beginning, who does most of the work, who sees it all the way through to the end. That's the producer credit. Okay. And then there are offshoots of that: co-producer, associate producer, and then there's the line producer, who generally will get an executive producer credit. Okay, so that's somebody I didn't mention under the executive producer category. And the line producer is the guy that the creative producer hires to physically produce the film, meaning that's the guy that's going to rent the trailers, get the permits for the locations, right? He's doing all the nuts and bolts of the actual film production. So he's on set every day, overseeing all of the actual day-to-day producing on the film. And that person sometimes might also be creative, but usually that's what we call the nuts and bolts person who's overseeing all of the day-to-day on the film. So that's kind of, just to break down the various distinctions. But there are not any real hard and fast rules to that, other than when you see the PGA mark going to a producer. That's where the Producer Guild has determined that, yes, that person has satisfied a certain level of requirements.
Wow, that's fantastic. When was that introduced?
Maybe about 5 years now. I don't know exactly. It's recent. It's within the last 5 to 7 years, I would say.
And what's the criteria to achieve that? For instance, I've produced a short film. How could I achieve that PGA mark?
By doing the actual work in the film. So the PGA will look at all the emails. You have a chance to submit, make your case, basically, that you were the one on the day-to-day, that you were the one making, like when a creative producer gets a script, sometimes there are rights issues, so you have to acquire the script. So I know contracts, like I'm really well versed in all kinds of contracts and legal. Like I basically, and not every producer knows all this, but I've trained myself to know every bit of how to make a movie, so I can pretty much make a movie from start to finish. So I'm the one shepherding it through that entire process. So I'm involved, like, for example, I'm involved in all the meetings when you hire, let's say, any creative person on the film. So if you're going to hire a production designer, as an example, I would be attending production designer meetings. So when it comes down to who's going to receive the PGA mark, I'm going to submit all of, my backup to show that I was part of this process and that I actually produced the film, that this is not just a vanity credit I'm receiving, because that happens.
A question for yourself. You started as an intern in the industry. Did producing come naturally to you? Did you have to work hard at it? Was there a mentor you had that actually gave you some information where the penny dropped of this is how to produce?
Yeah, I was really lucky to have a mentor who was highly experienced. And he would always say, yeah, you can watch me and learn what not to do. And I always thought that made a little bit of sense. But, does anybody really know what they're doing in producing? Sometimes, maybe. But I feel like it's not like a regimented process. There really isn't any one road or avenue to go down. So you kind of have to, everything has to be figured out. That's what I always say. It all has to be figured out. So it really wasn't like he would say to me, okay, so this is what you do. It was never that ever. It would just be, we would just be doing it, or I would have to figure out how to do it. And that's how I would learn. So, I always say, people always come to me and say like, oh, I just need somebody to give me a break, or just need somebody to give me a chance. And I kind of feel like people just generally don't give people breaks or chances. You kind of have to go after it and get it. You have to take it. It's rarely given. It has to be taken. And so if you put yourself in that mindset, you'll be fine. But if you sit around thinking that someday you're going to get your big break, to me is like some Hollywood fantasy. And maybe it'll happen. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. But I think you want to be more proactive in terms of your career, or you're going to be spending a lot of time maybe hoping and waiting. So, my experience was nobody was handing anything out. The opportunities were there, and I had to seize on them.
I totally agree with that. I think any creative, or within the industry or outside the industry, you need a killer instinct. I think very few people have that killer instinct, that it's a drive. It's like a hunter's drive, that they are tunnel vision and they are going to make it happen. Regardless if, it presents itself, they'll create it. They will create the opportunity and they will take it with both hands. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because when you first go out into the marketplace with projects, you're going to get a lot of people passing. And if you're of the mindset, or if you're not of the mindset that I'm just going to make this happen no matter what, you will likely give up. Now, every movie I've ever made has been passed on hundreds of times, including Hacksaw Ridge. So the phenomenon that occurs in the movie business is that, and William Goldman, writer of All the President's Men, said this, and it's a famous saying, that nobody knows anything. And it's very true, because people don't really know. Sometimes they know, but most of the time they really don't know, because for a lot of reasons, they may not have the vision to see what I see. And so you have to really believe and have confidence in your project and in your abilities. And you have to, again, create the reality instead of waiting for somebody to get it. So you're going to hear a lot of no's, but you have to. It's imperative, and it's incumbent upon you to push through the no's to a yes. And I think it's a lot like dating, to be honest with you. If you're dating and the first couple of relationships don't work out, you don't give up on dating. You keep trying to date, right? I mean, it's like anything else. It's not that just because somebody said no, that means it's not good. Just because somebody didn't connect with you doesn't mean you're not good. It just means the situation maybe wasn't the right situation, or maybe the timing wasn't right, or maybe you didn't convey the project properly, or maybe the person you're talking to doesn't have the proper vision for it, or whatever. There's a million reasons. But if you focus on the reasons why it didn't happen, unless you're using that for instructive purposes to make your approach better, it's not going to be helpful. So you have to keep pushing through it.
What has been one of the best projects, or the best project, that you were so close to getting made but never did?
Well, the one project that I didn't wind up producing, that I was very fond of, that I was very connected to, very extremely passionate about, was a movie called Lone Survivor. And Lone Survivor, a film that was made by Universal, Peter Berg directed it, Mark Wahlberg stars in it, was a film that I came upon the book. There was a book written by a Navy SEAL in Afghanistan, and who had the most incredible story of being left behind enemy lines, and literally had to crawl his way back to safety. He had written the book, but he did not have a chance to put the book into the marketplace the way most books go out into the marketplace, via a publisher, to book agents. It wasn't really shopped around Hollywood, because he had to actually go back on tour again. He was going on another tour. And so that process was delayed. And when he came back, he was on a talk show, and I happened to hear him. Anyway, I was so taken by this story. I bought the book and I read. The book is not it's a 400 or 500 page book. I think I read most of it in one night, in one sitting. I made notes. I came in the office the next day and I started pitching it to David Permit, who I was working for at the time. And I said, "This is the most amazing story. We have to make this movie." And he said, "Great, let's track down Marcus Luttrell, who was the writer of the book. Let's find out who represents him, and let's pursue this." And we did. Turns out we knew Marcus's attorney. We had been in business with his attorney. He was a Hollywood entertainment attorney that we knew. He told us that Marcus was not taking any meetings with producers. He had been on tour. The book had been out for a year. He had another producer who was interested in pursuing it, and basically that was that. And they were trying to sell it. He really wasn't interested in talking to anyone else. But the attorney said, "Listen, I know you. I'll set up a meeting with Marcus, and you could talk to him." And I went into the meeting, and it was one of the most emotional, one of the most memorable, one of the most impactful meetings I'd ever been in. Because at the end of the meeting, I was weeping. I was in tears. Just being in a room with this hero, with the bravery of this man who had gone to war to protect us. What an incredible story he had. What an emotional connection I had to this man, to his bravery, to everything he had been through. It was incredible. And I don't know. I guess I must have said the right things in the meeting, but at the end of the meeting, he said, "You know what? I wanna see if we can do this together. And I've got another producer, and we're gonna go out with this, and we're gonna talk to studios, but I want you to represent me at one of the studios." And long story short, we wound up attaching Steven Spielberg, who was also into the project at the time. He had his radar. He was on his radar screen too. And we wound up joining forces with him and DreamWorks, and a bidding war occurred, and we wound up losing the project to Universal. And like I mentioned, the movie was made with Pete Berg. And that, for me, was one that got away, and one I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to produce, because that is an incredible story too, and an amazing movie. And another war movie, which quite frankly, I'm really not a fan of war movies, but I think that's why I think Hacksaw Ridge was so successful, because it's not a war movie necessarily. And I also think that contributed to the success of Lone Survivor, because of what it was about.
Yeah.
And really what that story was about, and Marcus Luttrell knew before the movie was even made what he wanted it to be about. And it was really about the camaraderie of these Marines. The way they work is in tandem. They don't work with one person being the leader. They work in tandem. And when I met with him, he said to me, because Mark Wahlberg's name, quite frankly, was the first name everybody was talking about, even before the screenplay was written and before the movie was made. He was always the guy that everybody had in mind to be in the movie, and then he went starring in the movie. But Marcus Luttrell's perspective on it was, whoever plays me probably shouldn't be a movie star, because I shouldn't be more important than any of my other colleagues, comrades.
That's mind blowing. I can feel it in you as well. What it meant to you. I like raw honesty of how it felt, the impact that story had on you. I can feel it. That's what I love about storytelling. And sometimes fact is stranger than fiction. Like how things work out. I couldn't catch my breath with Hacksaw Ridge. Not to give too much away to those who haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it, because it is unbelievable. Incredible film. But the moment, the prayer, let me get one more. Wow.
Yeah,
It's
if you're not in tears.
sometimes we have the symbol of strength is almost painted in a form that we believe someone, a Hercules type figure, this slayer. But that isn't true. The hero's the courage against danger, against what you believe in, sticking with it in moments that are challenging like that. It really gripped me. What was it like being on set with Andrew Garfield, or when you went to set, being there with Vince Vaughn, working with Mel Gibson? How was that?
Well, when you're on the set of a movie, it's just a dream come true, right? Because you've been reading these words on they're printed in black ink on a blank white page initially, right? One time I worked with a writer and he said he held up a white piece of paper and he said, "You see that?" He goes, I got to make that funny." He was a comedy writer. But when you show up on set and you see everything is built, right? Everything that was just in your imagination, and then it's built, and then you're interacting with the actors, and it's just your dreams come true, man. I mean, what can I say? It's the best feeling ever, right? And watching professionals work, Mel Gibson is the consummate professional. What an amazing talent, right? And brings so much experience and knowledge to the set. And I really think for him, this film, I think, struck a chord with me. But I really feel like in terms of, who he is, it really meant something, to him and his life. And I think it was an important film for him at the right point in time.
Yeah, because I didn't know this for many years, but he's actually Australian, and I never knew that
Yes, yes, he is.
because he's got such a natural American accent. You'd think. I mean, I'm British, so
Yes.
I would assume he's American. But I love films, and I go deep into them. I love to understand how they put together. I love every aspect of them, so I do my research. Um, I've seen all his films. I really enjoyed Andrew Garfield in The Social Network. There's that moment where the shares have been diluted and he slams the laptop down, and then he makes a movement at Justin Timberlake and he flinches. And it's the way he puts emotion in his face and really conveyed that moment. It's incredible. That's true acting when you actually forget. You believe it. You're in the story. You're that convinced that this is really happening. You're in the story. You're not sitting on a sofa. You're not sitting on a chair. You're not in a cinema. You're there, and he has that quality. I really rate him, and I loved how he transformed. Very versatile. What he's like in The Social Network, which many will know, versus what he's like in Hacksaw Ridge. You could say they're completely two different sides of the spectrum. That's a great actor. That's very, very authentic. And Vince Vaughn, we all love Vince Vaughn. That man's
Is he
just
great? Isn't he great? Yeah, there was pushback, in the casting, because he's a comedy guy, right? So, there's a tunnel vision in Hollywood. Getting back to Andrew though, who's just the most amazing guy. I got to tell you, he is a prince, really. And there's a picture I think I have online of the two of us at the premiere. What a sweet, kind, gentle person. But I'll say this, a movie like Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss was from the Deep South, and for Andrew Garfield, being a Brit, right, which of course well in the accent, to be able to pull off a Southern accent without making it sound cliche or hokey, that is really hard to do. That takes a special talent just to get that accent right. Not just an American accent, but to do an American accent that doesn't sound like a hokey Southern accent, which is kind of what we're used to seeing, like on TV shows and things. You see it a lot because it's exaggerated. But in this case, Andrew had to get that right, and that wasn't easy to nail. So apart from, yeah, becoming the character and having it show up in his facial features and all of that, which is amazing. And you're right, that's like now you're just doing it naturally, because you embody that character. Getting that voice tonality and the accent, I can't even believe how actors do that, honestly. I worked with an actress, Rooney Mara, who's enormously talented actress. And she's in a film I made called Youth and Revolt, and she's now gone on to become a pretty big star. But I was talking to Rooney on the set of Youth, and she had to learn French. She had a block of French dialogue in the script. And I said, "Do you speak French?" And she goes, "No, I don't know French, but I'll learn the dialogue." If you see her in the movie say this dialogue, I defy you to tell me she doesn't know how to speak French, because it's flawless,
Wow.
in my opinion. So actors are like, I don't think people understand the superpower that actors have, because if it's done right, you don't notice it. That's the key. If it's done right, you won't notice it's done right. That's why we say you have to look at bad movies. You have to watch as many bad movies as you do good
Yes.
movies, right?
Yes.
So you can, so you
100%.
know the difference, because when it's being done right, it looks like it's easy. It look like you don't learn from it. But if it's being done wrong, you go, "Oh yeah, they should have done this or that or this,"
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so that's what I think. That's what I think. Andrew Garfield's performance is Oscar worthy and is taken to a whole nother level because of what he had to what he had to do with the part, which wasn't easy.
I've always been of the perception that great actors are almost on screen, alter ego, off screen, more calm, reserved, introverted. Is that correct? Would you say some of the greatest actors that you've worked with, are they quite shy off camera? Are they quite private and reserved? Versus then this alter ego comes out on screen? Or are they both sides?
It depends. So I've worked with actors that go both ways.
Uh-huh.
You know, I worked with Anton Yelchin. He was a genius. He was, I mean, God rest his soul. He died very tragically. Um, Very sad story. But Anton Yelchin would have gone on to become one of the greatest actors of his generation. No question in my mind. He was a very deep thinking, very serious, very committed, very highly trained actor. Started when he was, I don't know, 6, 7 years old. Um, he was amazing. I watched him go toe to toe with Robert Downey Jr. and hold his own. He was incredible. He was not necessarily the most gregarious, outgoing type of individual. He was to himself. He stayed with his close circle of people that he was comfortable with. Um, just who he was. Great guy, great kid. Nothing bad to say about him at all. Uh, from a personality standpoint, very, very focused, very present, all of those things. Really serious guy, really serious person. Um, um, I worked with Ray Liotta on 2 movies. Ray is also seriously an intense guy, but the most gregarious, the nicest, the kindest, and God rest his soul too. Unfortunately, Ray's passed as well. Um, but what a guy. Ray would come into the office. The assistant would ask Ray, "Oh, can I get you a drink or something?" Ray would say, Where is it? Is it in the kitchen? Let me get it. I'll get it." I mean, what a humble man. Um, you know, I my experience with actors though is from the perspective of a producer. So I would say that actors behave themselves around producers maybe more than they behave themselves around other people. I don't know. So you hear all kinds of stories, but very rarely have I had not such a great experience. Most of my experiences have been really magical, really great, really wonderful. Working with Robert Downey Jr., highlight of my life. I learned so much from watching Robert work, just watching him work. Again, another consummate professional, another person who takes everything he does serious as a heart attack, comes on set prepared, shows up, knows exactly what he's doing. He'll scream the scene, he'll do it in a whisper. Both of them are brilliant. Both takes brilliant. I don't know how he does it. He is truly gifted. He's got so many. He started when he was a kid. His dad was in the industry. He's got all kinds of natural abilities and experience. And when you combine natural talent and experience, that's a pretty good combination. That's going to set you to the higher levels of your profession, I think. So yeah, working with Robert Downey Jr. was a real treat for me. Working with Sigourney Weaver, that she was somebody else that was unreal on the set. I remember she called a meeting with all the producers. She had two requests. Neither one was about her. It was about her team. Can I get this from my assistant? Can I get this from my other teammate? They're having challenges. Can we help them? Unreal, right? What a woman. Also, what an amazing actress. And was nominated. Andrew was nominated for an Academy Award in my film Hacksaw Ridge. Sigourney Weaver was nominated for an Emmy Award in my film Prayers for Bobby. So I think that backs up, what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Just a few amazing, experiences I've had with actors.
We're talking about legends. Sigourney Weaver is a legend. Alien, Ghostbusters. I think there's a presence between the greatest actors, the greatest writers, the greatest producers, the greatest directors. There's a presence. There's something about actors on screen, their presence, that they bring almost a quality I can't, maybe you can, I can't put my finger on what it is, but I know it's there. I know when you're in the presence of greatness, when someone is a cut above. Sigourney Weaver's a cut above. Robert Downey Jr. is a cut above. Andrew Garfield, still a very young guy, fantastic body of work already, has the same quality, that cut above. And when you were speaking about humility, to add to that, I've read a couple of things on Keanu Reeves, how humble this guy is, where there was someone in the production team or someone on set struggling to pay their mortgage, and he paid it, or he wired through a significant amount of money and didn't want any attention for it, just did it. And I saw an image once of him sitting down with a homeless guy, and he sat there for a couple of hours and just listened to him. That's incredible. And I think there's a level of humility at the top, the real top of the tree. Because I think that they know also that they're not there just on their own accord. There's so many people who are involved who help them get to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that's a difference maker, honestly. But I think actors are smart. I think you have to be smart in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a certain amount of intelligence necessary to understand, how you sort of need to treat people. And not, I mean, there are people who can be abusive, certainly. I haven't experienced a lot of that. I think, that gets a lot of the attention sometimes when it happens. But in my experience, and again, this is from the perspective of a producer, with actors, actresses, performers, just all, levels of talent, I seem to find that sort of humility and quality where they are that they can connect with other people, because filmmaking is a collaborative medium, so it's really hard to do it alone, right? You need other people. And you can be a painter and you don't need anybody, and you could be a sculptor and you don't need anybody. You can write music and you maybe don't need a lot of other people. But in filmmaking, you need other people. So I think your talent in knowing how to get along with people and knowing how to treat people, and some people know how to do that better than others, will definitely contribute to your success and how high you rise in the ladder. And I found that the people that are at the very top of the ladder seem to be the nicest people. I've met Spielberg a couple times, and he is absolutely lovely. I mean, and many others. And they all tend to be similar in that regard. And I think it's because they really do have to know how to connect with people, and they have to know how to convince people that of their vision. We were talking about this earlier. And I find a lot of times that, you go out there and people may not see it, they may not get it, but they may hire you or they may buy your project because they believe in you as a person. And I think that's really true of, when you find somebody who's an investor or a financier. I'm told that this is kind of how it works at the highest levels of financing, that or start with startups, right? Like tech companies and things. Yeah. You're investing in the idea, yes, but I think you're more so investing in the person that's going to execute the idea.
100%.
Yeah, and so that becomes a determining factor in success. And so if you're just focused, if you have a great idea, but you don't know how to talk to people or interact with people, there's probably going to be a limit as to how far you can push that idea. Yeah, maybe. 100%. I don't know.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I think it's the desire in someone. I think it's the character in someone. You reference certain points with Robert Downey Jr. Turns up, he's serious on set. He's turned up, he's ready. He can play it both ways. He's there to kill. He's a killer. Yeah. And I think killers, if they get a whiff of another killer, they know they're in safe hands. They know, I believe he can pull it off. I believe on his instincts. I believe in his will. I believe in his heart. I believe he can do it. And that's what sometimes we buy into. They always say people buy people, or buy from people. So, I think that makes a lot of sense that it works the same way in the industry. And just a question for you, as a creative producer who goes out and sources scripts, who attaches them to projects. What is the difference between an amateur script to a high level professional script that executives are fighting for? What's the difference between those two, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, you could start with the real basics and say, okay, a script that's not formatted properly is not very professional. So that's pretty obvious. But I think you're asking me, like, what are the qualities that take it to the next level?
Yeah.
So proper formatting probably won't do that, unfortunately. But I tell you, I think what it is marketability is what it all comes down to.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, you have to look at not the beginning of the process, you have to look at where you're going to wind up in the process. And back in the day, legendary producer Sam Arkoff used to actually go out and sell his movies. So he would take a video cassette box and he would do artwork on it, and he would make it look like the movie was already made, and he would sell that first, and then he would go make the movie. So he would do it backwards, because if he wasn't able to sell it, why would he make it? So he would want to know that he was going to make his money back beforehand. But what's behind that is marketability, right? The idea that, okay, I'm going to be able to sell this to somebody, that there's an audience for this. So with screenwriters, they'll hear what they get from producers and from people who are trying to help them. They'll say, who's the audience for this? Right? Where are we going to sell it? Who's going to go see it? That's obviously really important. Not something writers are always thinking about, though. Right? So the next level scripts are the ones that have sort of figure that out maybe, and have a consistent tone. So inconsistency of tone is like something that can be considered maybe more amateurish or less developed. Concept, right? The servicing of a high concept idea and how that works. Structure, screenplays that, you know, maybe are too long, or first act's too long, or don't have a first act break. Okay, those are screenplays that aren't gonna go to the next level. Maybe are not, you know, are more. I don't really like calling things amateur, because I don't really necessarily believe. I don't want writers to get caught up with that in that, because I think writers tend to think that they're not good enough. That's maybe what that leads to, and that's, I read a lot of screenplays written by high level writers that sometimes suck, right? Yeah, it just, huh?
Why do they suck? What is it that makes them suck?
Because even A-list high level writers, it doesn't mean that they're always doing everything right or they know what they're doing. Sometimes they get lucky. Sometimes it's just, that's why I don't like to put a label on it, because I think that it's not an exact science. You know,
It's subjective.
it's totally subjective. That's
Yes.
that's what I was going to say. It's
Yeah.
totally subjective. So why my opinion is just my opinion. I don't People say, Steve, tell me if this is professionally written. I don't, is it professionally written? Okay. Is it formatted correctly? Do you have fade in, fade out, or using too many cut tos? Yeah, that I can judge. But creatively, I don't even want to implant that in somebody's brain if I have a reaction to something and it's just my opinion, right?
Yeah.
So I can only judge things from how I feel. I don't say this is not good and everyone will say it's not good. This is great and everyone will say it's great, right? There's that side of it where I'm bringing it to people and they're telling me I'm crazy, but I know it's great. So what does it matter what anybody says? What matters is how I think about it. And that's what you were saying, right? You were just saying that people have to believe, they have to go out there knowing that it's something worthy and convince other people of it, right?
100%. I totally agree with that. I personally believe, Steve, I think there's the basics. I think if you're going to put your content out there and it's got spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes, this is basics. Can't be doing that. That's just basic. That is, in my opinion, and I respect what you said, you know, not dividing amateur and professional, because sometimes professionals aren't up to it and amateurs are overlooked. Yeah. And it's down to what you view them as. But there's certain mistakes that you shouldn't make, just under quality control. Spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, structure. There is a structure, but it is interesting to see how we move forward with structure. Because, for instance, at some point, there would have been, within movies, the introduction of subtitles, which I thought The City of God did incredibly well, where it was actually meant to be subtitled in a different language, in English or whatever language it needed to be in. Unbelievable. It makes that film. It actually adds to the quality of the film. So I don't know, that's in a filmmaking sense. But in terms of scripts, yes, there's a structure. There's the Blake Schneiders, there's the Sid Fields, there's, you know, these archetypes and these Greek beats we almost follow. I get it. Be interesting to see if we can move it further, though. Be interesting to see if a story is that gripping that it goes beyond structure. You know, that might not come into Hollywood. That might be elsewhere in the world. That might be an indie film. But dependent on, like what you said with marketability, the reaction from the audience. If everybody's loving that, I suppose you've got to take notice, haven't you? If everybody loves the way that that's been filmed, that's been written, you know.
Right. Yeah, well, I'll give you maybe an example of that. So Hacksaw Ridge, in terms of the storytelling of Hacksaw Ridge, it's very unique in the way it works, right? In the structure of it, because the main character does not change. what we call an angel character, and not many movies work this way. Very few movies work this way, where your main character remains the same and everything around him changes.
Yeah.
So there's like a sort of a breaking of the rules. Of there really aren't rules, there are just guidelines. And this is why you have to be a little careful in how you look at things. And you're right, some films are not going to follow certain structural, conceits or what have you. And those films, in terms of marketplace, might be more challenging because, again, those rules kind of relate to marketplace. And the other thing in terms of marketplace, the second thing is engagement. So engagement is what I like to talk more about because marketplace can change, but engagement is the first thing you need. So if someone, well, maybe marketplace is because you need to get someone in the theater, but once you get them in the theater, you want to keep them there.
100%.
So it's kind of a twofold thing. So I try to talk to writers in terms of engagement and as opposed to, let's say, the rules. So when like I worked with Oliver Stone on a project, and Oliver came into the room and he said, "Why do we like this character?" And that blew me away because I was like, "Wait, Oliver Stone, you are like a renegade filmmaker who would never like say that to a writer because that sounds like writing 101 notes to me." And yet, I mean, you're a genius and you're saying, why do we like the character? Well, he's just falling back on these basic, tenets of filmmaking, of story writing, screenwriting, right? And that blew me away because I'm like, but wait, you're the genius Oliver Stone. You don't quote writing 101 rules. Like, but no, he's thinking about those things. That's what makes him great because those things are like innate inside of him. But if he's going to break those rules, he knows what they are first. Yes. He understands what they are, and if he's going to break them, he wants to know how that's going to work.
Wow.
That's the genius.
He is a genius. Any Given Sunday?
Yeah.
There's a part at the end of the film, Jamie Foxx, Al Pacino walking down. Al Pacino was the mentor, telling him about him running into a guy. He'd had the women, had the trophies, had it all. But he said the one thing that he missed was looking down the field with all those other players. And as Jamie Foxx is about to respond to him, he's already gone down the tunnel. That was genius. And it comes in with the music.
Yeah. I mean, Oliver's, what can you say? He's an icon. He's a legend. I mean, the guy wrote Scarface for gosh sakes, I mean, how much better does it get? Talk Radio, there's another great movie. Wall Street, there's a great movie. Salvador, there's a great movie. Oliver and Oliver's story's great. He had to write 10 screenplays before he sold one.
Wow, that is.
Yeah.
Oliver Stone. Let me just see if I remember. Charlie Sheen, the war film, very young in it.
Platoon.
He directs Platoon. Is that correct?
Yeah.
He does.
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
In Vietnam, didn't he? I believe.
Yeah. He's very aligned with Vietnam and Cambodia, and Oliver really respects those cultures.
No, I know. There's some wonderful cultures. Every culture has a place. Every culture has its place and wonderful parts of it. But yeah, I looked into him. Listen, you said it, legend, and you study legends. But it's interesting what you said about watching bad films. Watch bad films. Really bad films. Really, really bad. What would you define as a bad film? What is it in a bad film? There's a quality in a great film. Yeah. So, for instance, how do you determine between that is a great film? So, for me personally, The Green Mile. Green Mile's a great film. That's a great. Yeah. I have my understanding of what makes it great. But again, it's subjective. Your favorite film could be something else. and you may think something's great. I don't. Other way around. What does it? What does a great film have? What does a bad film have?
I mean, I think a great film has something to say.
Yeah,
Like when I leave the movie theater, if I'm thinking about the movie, now I'm not saying a movie should be banging you over the head with a message
yeah, of course.
or be heavy-handed or be on the nose, right? I'm saying a movie that's about something could be about the human condition, right? But how am I connecting to the movie, right? And this relates to marketing too. But what is the thing? What is the universal theme? What is the thing in the movie that I'm going to connect to that's going to change maybe my way of thinking about it, right? I think a movie that can do that is really next level type of filmmaking.
Yeah,
Um, the other thing that great makes a great movie is engagement. So there's a movie that's one of my favorite movies called Sling Blade.
love it, love it.
It's genius. It's just absolutely genius. Now, Sling Blade is a long movie. I think it's almost I want to say it's like 2.5 hours long. It's a really long movie, but when I watched it, I had no idea it was that long because I was so
Hooked.
compelled by it.
Oh,
I was so drawn in by the storytelling. And to me, that's a great movie, right? That's what a great movie will do. It will connect with you on some level, either emotionally, which is what movies should be doing, or intellectually, or both. Both is the best case scenario, of
of
course.
course, 100%.
Um, but I think, that to me, when I think about great movies and the movies that I love, also the other marker of a great movie is I'm watching the movie and I'm following the plot and I have no idea where it's going. So it surprises me.
Of course.
Okay. It's going down the road this way, and all of a sudden it makes a U-turn and starts going this way. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? All right. That's related to engagement too, right? But it's also related to you're taking me on a journey and I can't see this much ahead. And so we're on the roller coaster and we're going all the way up, 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 up. I'm like, oh my God, what? And all the way down, 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 So it's like it's all those things, right, that make it great.
100%.
A bad movie, doesn't have those things. That's the easy answer for that.
I totally 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I spent 2 hours writing a feature film. I've watched a lot of films, a lot of films. Now that doesn't make you a great writer. You need to read a lot of scripts.
Yeah.
Also, I believe the twists and turns that are unpredictable when they go in your favor and against your favor are the best. That is what we have muscle memory. Great films stay in our muscle memory, how we felt in that moment. That truly pierces our emotion, our heart. Like that to me is what a great film does in a great way and a saddening way. But it gets you and it's lured you in. You've been lured in. And a bad film doesn't do any of that. And the pace is off. you can't understand how you've got here because it doesn't make any sense. And that's the trick, I believe, to make something logical make sense, but also without you seeing it coming. That's a hard skill. That logically it's unfolded. Yeah, that actually makes sense how all this has happened. I still didn't see it coming. And sometimes I believe it's the power of the plan. Having such a subtle plan in the beginning or in an opening moment, creating so much noise and distraction and action that when it pays off, you completely forgot about it. That's how I feel in a great film.
Yeah, if you take a look at Hacksaw Ridge, I think the way that film works is interesting because it starts with the love story, right? So when you see like yeah, I think Private Ryan has the bookend of at the cemetery, I think. And that's really great filmmaking too. But a lot of war movies will start in the war. And, we made the decision to start with the love story because what's more universal? And it's taking you on the ride, but it's saying, "Oh, come on in this warm, comfy cart, and we're gonna go up the tracks, and it's all safe and nice." And so it lures you in and puts you at ease, and then it drops the hammer on you when you hit the battle scenes, right?
Well, hell,
So
bro.
if you look at the construction of that, it's kind of similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I love the opening. Opening's tidy, sharp. No wasted dialogue. No unnecessary conversation. No unnecessary scene. Serious. Loved it. Really loved it. That was something I thought about, when I was watching it. I thought, I'm going to mention this to Steve. I'm going to tell him the opening's bang on because it is. It's very good. I love that you come from a different angle. And but what you show is you shine light on the qualities of Desmond. And those qualities are perseverance. Doesn't quit. He sticks to what he believes. It's honestly, I rate it. And I've got a very, very high standard. It's just a movie fan. And everyone can be a movie fan. We have our tastes, we have our standards, what we would call a good film, a great film. That had it for me. It had that cinematic quality that I lost myself in the film. I'm rooting for him. I can't control my emotions. They're just being swept away in the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm really listen. I don't. I found the story. I worked on the film, but obviously everybody else who worked on it brought all the magic and all the incredible, stuff that you see on screen. That's a team of people. That's Mel Gibson. That's Andrew Garfield. That's the other producers. That's the people that work on set, the people that did our special effects, the cinematography. They all bring amazing talent to the equation. And I what I did was I found an amazing story, and and they take it the rest of the way for the most part. But that's what I see my job as. I'm a storyteller, and when you say what's a great film, I say a great film is a film that moves me emotionally, but tells me a story that is actually about something. Because I always say, if you're going to tell a story, there should probably be a point to it. Again, not a heavy-handed one, but there's a reason why you want to sit down and tell me this amazing story about this hero who went into World War II without a gun and somehow winds up winning the Congressional Medal of Honor for bravery. How did he do that? That's incredible. So yeah, and the other thing, that movie, what is that movie about? Like it's about what you just said, conviction, about a man, right? It's not about war necessarily. It's not an anti-gun movie. It's not a movie about religion. It's not, right. It could have been about all those things because all those things are in the movie, but the movie is about conviction and belief.
Yeah.
And that is universal because war, religions, all those things, people have different opinions about.
Yep, divided opinions. But
right, and guns, right? Those are things that people have divided opinions about. But what's the unifying thing that takes the movie to the next level, that makes it worthy of a worldwide release? Yep. Is that it's touching upon themes that are universal. And to me, when I started in the business, that's the first thing I learned about great screenplays.
It's massive. There's so many ambitious screenwriters with conviction for their craft, with conviction for the story, who just want to be seen, just want their story seen. And obviously, yourself as an example, as a producer, you have one pair of hands. You're juggling a lot of balls. You're doing a lot in that sense. But it means a lot for them to learn from you. And, I really appreciate that. In terms of your future, where does it lie? What's next for Steve Longi?
Steve Longi is just going to be doing what he's been doing for the last 25 years, and that's trying to make great movies. That's really it for me. I don't have kids and I'm not married, so really all I got to do is figure out how to get the next movie made. So I'm working on the first true story about the first alien abduction. It's an amazing story. It's another incredible true story about a interracial couple in the 1960s, African American gentleman, and they go on a vacation. They come home for the next year and a half or so. They can't eat, they can't sleep. Something happened on this trip that they know something happened. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about it, but it's upended their lives. And a doctor shows up at their doorstep. He's pioneering the science of hypnotherapy. He says, "Let me tell you, I'll put both of you under, and I'll find out what's troubling you." And they both tell under hypnosis the same story, most horrific story about being brought aboard an alien spacecraft and having these horrible medical experiments being done on them. They were abducted by aliens, it turns out, and the aliens show them a map, a star map, and they draw the star map under hypnosis, and they bring it to Caltech to try to line it up to a star system, and it doesn't line up. But at the end of the movie, 10 years later, they go back to Caltech and they've discovered more star systems, and they line the map up perfectly to what turns out to be the nearest star system to our Earth. So was she telling the truth? Were they really abducted or not? Well, it's up for you to decide. So that's my next film. It's the Betty and Barney Hill story. I optioned the rights to a book called The Interrupted Journey. John.
Sorry, was it self-published, the book, or traditionally published?
No, it was published in the 70s. So it's an iconic book about the subject matter, but it's a story that in the alien community is an iconic story, and it's the first recorded incident of alien abduction. And they drew pictures of the aliens as well, and that's where you see all these, the big eyes and the big head. It was from this encounter they had. Yeah, so it's like the origin story for aliens, and that's a big one.
It sounds massive. Have you got any actors, directors attached to it so far? Is there anyone?
I do. I can't. George Gallo wrote the script for me. I think I can say that much. But beyond that, I can't talk about who else is.
Of course, yeah.
But you would know them. You would know them.
Steve, would they know me?
They might.
No,
I wouldn't doubt it. They might.
One day, buddy. Personal preference, as part of the audience, what's your favorite film? You like Sling Blade. What's your favorite film growing up?
Of all time?
Yeah, go on.
Well, that's the most impossible question to answer. So I can only. I mean,
growing up.
I grew up with some of the greatest movies ever made. I mean,
you did. You grew up in the era. The era.
I mean, Dog Day Afternoon is like one of my all-time favorite movies. Al Pacino.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a hell of a movie.
Have you ever met Al Pacino?
But I spent time with his dad, actually. And his dad's name was Sal Pacino. Very nice man. And then we were sort of instrumental in getting Al the role in the Dr. Kevorkian project that HBO did. Because we were in Detroit filming something. We were in a parking lot and Dr. Kevorkian walks by. I don't know. It's so weird. But started talking to him and we were like, Dr. Kevorkian, okay, like, who's doing your story? And he said, it's at HBO. I don't know what they're doing with it, blah, blah, blah. And then we happened to, then we tried to get involved with his story. I'll make a long story short. But anyway, we didn't, there was another producer producing it. And what happened was we were on the phone with an agent at CAA, or no, we were in a meeting and she said, listen, I got to leave the meeting. I'm having lunch with Al Pacino. Do you guys have anything for him? And not even being the producers on the project, we said, Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, there's this amazing project at HBO about Kevorkian. He would be great for that. And she was like, "Oh, really? Thanks. Thanks for the tip." And next thing I know, they cast him and he starred in it. And I think he was nominated for an Emmy or won an Emmy for it. But that's the closest I've been to Al.
That guy.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
no doubt. I
Wow.
met De Niro. I have met De Niro.
Really? What was he
Yeah,
like?
that was amazing.
Yeah.
Huh?
Legend. What was he
Yeah.
like? What was he like in your experience?
Bob is very low key.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've from what I see, from what I
He's
watch.
very low key.
Yeah, I respect that. Good for him. You know, I'm sure it can be pretty. So with the world invading your life and privacy at every heartbeat.
Yeah, it gets tricky. And I think, yeah, for actors at that level, it can be very tricky. But yeah, I didn't spend, I haven't spent a lot of time with Mr. De Niro, but the times I've seen him, very low key man, very respectable man. Yeah, great actor, obviously. But yeah, so back to my favorite movies though, and Raging Bull, of course, is a favorite. Um, uh, Godfather. I mean, I could go, listen, it's such a hard question to answer, right? Because how do you choose, Godfather even over Godfather 2, or between even Dog Day and Godfather, or Jaws, Star Wars, one of my favorites is Empire Strikes Back. That's a movie that I remember leaving the theater and just being blown away by the ending, and oh my God, I can't wait to see the next one. And I remember seeing Jaws in a movie theater and the experience of people freaking out in the theater, and the woman next to me grabbed me, like she was so scared. I mean, so so those are my favorite movies too, and they come with all sorts of memories. But Witness for the Prosecution is a big favorite. If we go back into time, Alfred Hitchcock, I like Rebecca. That's a favorite. Dial M for Murder is probably one of the most perfect screenplays ever written. The writing is so tight, it's crazy. Back to the Future is like a perfect movie in my opinion.
Great.
So entertaining, so perfectly cast, so perfectly directed. Robert Zemeckis, what another amazing talent. Stanley Kubrick is one of my all-time favorite directors. So, Doctor Strangelove. How is there a better movie than Doctor Strangelove? Is Godfather better than Doctor Strangelove? Is how do I do this, right?
You're missing one though. You're missing one big one. One big one you haven't said, but it goes.
I'm missing 100 big ones. What do you mean? What do you mean? It goes on and on and on.
It does. It's the never-ending story because films that there are so many greats.
What I miss?
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely.
Goes without saying, it's just
Frank Darabont.
Yeah,
well, you brought up The Green Mile, so Frank Darabont.
So ironically, both Stephen King novels.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy that he's untouchable. I don't know how that guy does what he does, but there's a guy that's on a level that I don't think too many other people are on, right?
He's on another planet.
He's on another planet.
He's got his own galaxy.
He's got his own galaxy.
Stand by Me. He writes Stand By Me, Carrie, It. He writes The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, The Shining. Wow.
Yeah, what can you say about it?
Greatest stories ever told. If I wrote one of these stories,
you'd be a legend. Just one of those, you'd be. I know writers that have written one great movie that have had a 40-year career in Hollywood off of one great movie.
This is what I'm saying. But I also, someone who I put on that level in his own discipline, Stanley.
Kubrick.
No.
Stanley
in comic books.
Oh, Stan Lee. Yeah.
He's of that. He's cut of the same cloth.
Yeah, no question. Yeah. Stan Lee, sure.
Legend. If I wrote one of those stories, they'd be asking you, "What's Jonathan Nimmons like?" And you'd be saying, "He doesn't shut up."
He's got a really great English accent. I love hearing that.
Well, you want to
Where are
cast
you?
me, Steve? I'll come in. I'll come into a film.
I love it. I had never been to London up until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and I fell in love with London and the UK, and I just loved it there. And I got to say, the talent pool in the UK is incredible. It's incredible. The writers, the directors, the actors, some of the greatest actors are out of the UK. Andrew Garfield as an example. It's a great place for talent. It's a great place for theater. It's a great place for filmmaking.
The UK is
Yeah,
rich in literature. It's
big
rich.
time.
And it's embedded within the roots.
Yeah,
The ironic thing is, I can't speak for everyone. Listen, British filmmakers make solid, fantastic British films. Only my opinion now. All of us want to go to Hollywood. All of us want to be in LA. All of us want to be what we consider the top. And I know things are shifting because, for instance, Nigeria, Nollywood, as it's pronounced, Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood. Yeah.
right.
The
Yeah,
world is starting to open its doors and we're seeing
yeah,
new companies come through. And
yeah. It's open. The doors have been open for a long time. Netflix has changed their strategy now to focus on more,
Korean,
local productions.
South Korean movies, 37
Oh, oh,
productions have just took in.
well, right? You look at um, yeah, what's it called? Sorry, the Korean show, where they're killing everybody.
Squid Games.
Yeah, Squid Game. So, that was the number one show on Netflix, and it's dubbed, right? And then you see RRR. Have you seen RRR? RRR. Oh my God, you must see RRR. So if anybody, listening to this has not seen RRR, see that today on Netflix. And it's a movie out of India. It is, again, one of the best things on Netflix, not made in Hollywood. So the door is wide open. And you can do what you want to do wherever you are these days. It's the idea that you have to physically be in Hollywood is, I think those days are sort of ending. Now, yeah, geographical location is important sometimes. And, the core amount of business is done here. So I don't disagree with that.
Mhm.
And it is helpful to be here in many respects, but it doesn't mean you can't do, it doesn't preclude you from doing what you want to do wherever you are. That's what I would say.
100%, 100%. The barriers are coming down. The world is interconnected. We're talking on a podcast. Could have done that 25 years ago. Probably couldn't have. I don't know if you could have done it 20, 15. To a degree, you could. But the world's evolved, and we're in a new era. And a question I have for you as well. I'm sure you're aware with ChatGPT. What's that going to do to the industry? People can use now responsive artificial intelligence technology that can write them a script. Where
Yeah.
this will go? Is it a concern for the industry? Is it something that will accelerate the process? Is it something it could solely rely on? What's your thoughts?
Um, hmm. My thoughts are it probably will upend everything, honestly, as much as I don't want to believe that or think that. So that's why I hesitated. But I have a feeling that technology as a way of creeping into our lives and just changing everything. And then before we know it, we kind of forget what things used to be like.
Yeah.
So I think if people are going to start using artificial intelligence to create things, I think there's validity in that. I don't see what's wrong with that. Um, I think, in terms of like now there's a lot of uh deep fakes, what they call deep faking going on. So there are photos and there are videos on the internet that are not real, but they look like they're real.
Mm.
So the question, the thing that you bring up relates to that too. And then it comes down to like, are we even going to need to hire actors anymore? because we can just have an AI actor. And I don't doubt that that's what it's going to become at some point. I don't know, but I certainly don't doubt that. Um, will all actors be replaced by AI actors? I think it's possible. I don't know. Is it going to happen soon? Probably not. This is probably 20 years from now. Because if I've learned anything about technology and the way things move technologically, it takes forever. It moves like molasses. Like, in fact, when I first came to Los Angeles back in the 80s, I took a class and they told me, you know what? Someday people are going to be watching things on satellite with their own satellite dish, and the satellite dish will be this big. And you know what? The satellite dish on my roof is that big, but it took 20 years for that to happen.
Yeah.
So from the point when they know about the technology and have sort of perfected it to the point where it becomes in multi-use, it's a long time. I go to the supermarket. I don't check out with a real person anymore. I go to the automatic checkout. So the sadness to me is I love the convenience of it. It's great. And that's taking over because it works, right? And that's why I believe that if AI actors work and AI and ChatGPT works for writing or whatever, creating things, it's going to take hold. But what makes me sad is knowing that that's going to take jobs away from people. And then what does the job market look like with robots doing all of that?
Sure, it's the same as within the Industrial Revolution when we transformed from that and moved into, what we're into now. There's always a shift.
Right.
I'll be honest, I don't think it will take over to the levels that we probably fear it will. In my personal opinion, I believe that artificial intelligence will play its part to accelerate. There's one main component we're missing out of all this. It was created by humans. Can't replace a human brain. How can you? They didn't create us, we created it. Yeah. So
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure out how to replace a human brain. That's what you can't really bank on. So I'm extrapolating 100 years down the line. If you put me to sleep now and I wake up 100 years, like the Woody Allen movie Sleeper, which is genius, will I be surprised to see that everything is robotic and all that? No, probably not. You have to be in touch with what you really want out of life. And a lot of people don't want to sacrifice kids, a marriage, great vacations, who knows what, because they have to stay inside and work all weekend. Sometimes, people just aren't going to do that. So that's what I had to do. I literally spent, I think it was like 5 straight years of my life just getting up in the morning, going to an office, showing up at 8 a.m., leaving at 8 p.m., going home, working till 10 p.m., going to sleep, getting up and doing it all over again for 5 straight years.
I respect
until I got anywhere, until I was able to get any sort of traction. 100%. So that was a huge sacrifice. But I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, of course, you don't want to always, you want to see progression. You want to see the next step. You're chasing the next step. Tell me if I'm wrong here, Steve. You sound like a gentleman who is you versus you. I don't think you're looking around you. I think it's you versus you. I think it's you being the better version of you every day.
Yeah, I say the person you're in competition with is yourself. Yeah. Right. So I'm trying to do more today than I did yesterday.
Me too.
Right. So like I have my list of things I have to do. So that list is like, I've got a few lists, right? So the one that's up on my whiteboard is the one that I have to focus on to get any of those things done because they're slightly harder to get done. So it's not get gas or petrol, as you folks say, in the car. So that's something I may have to do, but that's not on the whiteboard. So the whiteboard is the things that I have to really focus in on to do. So that might be submit this project to this studio. So I've got to write the letter and get the materials together and find out right? So that might be on the whiteboard. So every day I'm trying to do at least one big thing on the whiteboard. Right. And then the next day, try to do one more thing that's on the whiteboard. So I'm tracking my progress. I'm only trying to beat myself or match myself from the day before. If I can do two things, then I beat myself from the day before. If I can do one thing, I can match myself. If I don't do anything, I didn't do enough.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm looking at it.
You're a killer. I feel exactly the same. That's what you've got to be. It's not killing. It's not like physically overshadowing anyone. It's not killing and bullying. I'm talking. You're a killer in what you're going after. You're a killer. You're killing the ground between you and what you want to get to. You know what I'm saying?
It's focus. You're killing the focus of it
100%.
because focus is the hardest thing. That's what happens is I write on the whiteboard. I walk away. I go on my run. I do whatever. Now I forget what the focus of the day needs to be. I go back to the whiteboard. There it is again. Okay. Oh, reset, refocus again. Because I'm constantly losing focus throughout the day. I'm dropping out of focus. Every time I walk over to the whiteboard and I look down the whiteboard, focus again. And then maybe I'll get one of them done. A lot of times I go to the whiteboard, I see something, I go, oh, let me go do that. I go do it. I get distracted. Don't do it. Yeah. Back to the whiteboard.
Yeah.
That's how my day goes. So I know how incredibly hard it is to stay focused. And I'm pretty good at focus. But I'm pretty organized. Like I'm creative, but I'm also very regimented. So I try to combine those two things. But it's hard. It's just really hard to do this stuff. Again, when people do it the right way, it looks easy. People are used to seeing very polished work. Movies, TV series, they're seeing the end result of it, which is something that's been polished 1,000 times. And they're comparing that to their screenplay work as it stands today. Well, you can't do that. That's not fair. You're doing yourself a disservice if you do that. So you need to understand that between the screenplay, we call that a blueprint. We don't call that the finished product. We say that's a blueprint. That's a blueprint. Once a director comes in, once an actor comes in, they're going to add their own level of talent to it, and it's going to take on a life of its own. It's going to change, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get deeper and more interesting, perhaps, right? So that's the nature of it. So you have to train yourself as a writer to not psych yourself out by doing that, right? So that's important. So what's in your head is important. The way you focus in on your work is important. If you're distracted by you're not good enough or that's better or I can't do that, how are you going to do great work? You're not going to do great work. You're going to constantly be checking yourself, right? Great work happens by mistake. Great work flows. It's generally not real planned out. I mean, if you can plan it out and give it some structure, great. But great work flows. It's when you establish flow, what they call flow. Okay. And you know when that happens. If you play sports, you understand that. Okay. If you do anything at a high level, you understand flow. And flow is when you're doing it naturally, when you're not thinking about it. It's coming through you naturally. You've established flow, right? Because the way to flow is the thinking. And once you're done with all the thinking, now you have to erase all the thinking. And that gets you to flow. But you need both those things. You can't say it's just flow and it's no thinking, or it's just thinking and it's not flow. Everything in life is built out of duality. So everything is two things. So I can, here's another way to say it. So sometimes something will happen to you. You might think it's the worst thing that ever happened to you. And 5 years from now, it was the best thing that ever happened to you. Well, that's the duality of it.
Yep.
Right. So if you want to buy into the bad thing, you can. Very easy to do. If you want to go against the grain and see the duality of it and then come from that angle, you'll be able to solve problems and figure things out a lot easier, because now you're looking at the whole thing and you're not just looking at the one thing.
Yeah.
Or the half of the whole thing. You see? Because that's how people look at things. They don't look at the whole thing. They only look at half of the whole thing. So you got to train yourself to look at it all. And the reason why we look at half of them is just because we have to give meaning to everything. And we're trained and conditioned that everything is actually means something and it's real. That's all bullshit. Very few things in life are real. There's almost no real established version of reality. There's no consensus really to what's real. There is a consensus to, okay, we're on the planet Earth as far as we know. That's the sky, that's the ground. Okay. There are some things that actually are kind of real, but most everything we react to and we deal with in life, it's all made up. It's just how we've been conditioned to think about it. So at the end of the day, if you can undo all that conditioning and you can get down to really what's real, and that's the goal of filmmaking, it's to approximate reality in every way, shape, and form, from the emotions to the scenery. It's all trying to approximate something that you buy into and engage with that you track as real, right? That's all part of the engagement and connectivity of it, which I talked about before. All these things relate. It's all how you live your life too. It's not just how you write screenplays or make movies. It's all how you approach how you do, how you do write screenplays and make movies. It all factors into that. So you have to use this sort of high level Buddhist philosophy to help you overcome the barriers which are so high and so challenging. You need this next level kind of philosophy to even the field, because otherwise you'll just be too up in your own head and you'll psych yourself out and you'll give up. That's what happens. Or you'll think you're not good enough and give up.
Yeah, I agree.
Or you'll just stop,
That's it. You have to create an ecosystem around you to stay focused, keep going, and also let off some steam. You got to let off some steam, but in the right ways. I totally agree with that. Lifestyle of someone, their ambitions, their dreams, and the work that they're doing are all interlinked. It is a flow. It is one system. Everything has to be in tune. And if you're in tune, I think you can achieve anything. But like you also mentioned, I think you have to sacrifice and you have to make a choice. You've got to make a choice. I don't think you can operate at your level unless you've got full focus. I think you got a chance.
One of the most profound things I ever learned in life was this, and you may have heard it in some of my other interviews, but your life is created by the way and the decisions that you make in reaction to things. So it's how you react that creates your reality. So in other words, good things happen to you, bad things happen to you. How you deal with those things is what's going to determine how your life turns out. So you are in full control of everything that happens to you in that sense. And once you embrace that, it's comforting, because being in control is where you want to be in life. People who are not in control of their lives are screwed up, right? They don't feel good about themselves. There's all kinds of issues when you're not in control. But when you actually understand and take responsibility for your life, and you do that by understanding that you are responsible for your life in the reactions you have to what happens to you. So some people are born rich and they wind up poor. Some people are born poor and they wind up rich. Why is that? It's how they dealt with their circumstances, not what their circumstances were.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're talking about too, it's seeing the full picture, the full universe of what you have to create around yourself. And it's not just one thing, it's everything. And everything is good and bad. And so you must embrace all of those things.
I totally agree. 100%. You have to. A quick question for you, Steve. How have films changed? We talk about you growing up as a young boy, the films then. We have the films we see before us now. How have they changed?
How have they changed? I think filmmaking's become more commercialized, probably, I would say, because when I look at the films of the 70s, they were able, back then the business wasn't really, it's not what it is today. Today it's a real big business. It's corporate style, big business. And back then it wasn't really, even though Paramount was owned by Gulf and Western, but they didn't, they were going to just fold Paramount at one point. They didn't understand the entertainment business really. And I think it's because back then you had more artistic filmmakers making films that you could actually release in movie theaters and people would go see, because that was way the business worked back then. And those films didn't necessarily have to make $100 million to break. I mean, you hear about Cameron making Avatar. He's got to make $2 billion to break even. I mean, you couldn't do anything like that in the 70s, really. That started to come into play. In fact, their movies didn't really there wasn't there weren't blockbusters back in the 70s. That's a 1980s term, actually. And it was born out of movies like Jaws and Star Wars. Those movies weren't really being made in the 70s if you look at what was made then. These movies were different, right? Steven Spielberg wasn't making the same movies that other filmmakers are making in the 70s. He was making more commercially accessible films. And I think in terms of the trajectory of filmmaking, I think it's become more of a business from that point in time on. And that corporate mentality or that business oversight has affected the way films are made. Now we've sort of gone back, it's cycled back around, I think, a little bit. And I think places like Netflix, they tend not to interfere with the filmmaking so much. They tend to trust the filmmaker more. So we've sort of gotten out of that kind of studio overseeing and giving notes to filmmakers and development hell thing. But the only reason why we came out of that is because it was too expensive to do business that way. It wasn't because they didn't want to give notes or opinions. They just said, you know what? This is costing us millions of dollars to do this. Why don't we just let the filmmakers figure it out? And if it's good, we'll release it. And if not, whatever. But, they can take more risks because you have streaming. The business has changed in terms of monetarily how you can make money. So that's definitely impacted creative. So in some ways it's helped creative, but in other ways it's hurt creative. Right. So it's not all just one thing anymore. It's become more complex. So I think that's how movies have changed. I think it's just become more of a business. Not to say you can't do great work, not to say you can't make great movies, because you can, because I think there's a place for them. But business has changed. And then with the pandemic, obviously theatrical releasing has changed. So, movies aren't necessarily being made for theatrical anymore.
Do you think that cinemas will still be around?
Yeah, I do. I don't think movies are going away. I don't think, because this year there were a lot of successful films that were released theatrically that did pretty well, actually. If you put good product in the marketplace, people will leave their house, and because the reason why is you can't, unless you have a movie theater in your backyard. And I worked for a guy that had that, but which is pretty cool. But you don't get the communal experience when you're just watching something home one-on-one. And so that's an added benefit that you get by leaving your house. So I think that's a need that theaters will satisfy. It's an event. It makes it more of an event. It's a date. It's another location to relocate to. There are things that you get back from leaving your house and going to a movie theater that you don't get just watching it one-on-one yourself. So I think that experience is a unique experience that will persist. Yeah, that people will want to have. I think that's true.
In terms of scripts that are bought, so for instance, you're here with Sylvester Stallone, Rocky. They offered him, what was it, up to $1 million? Offered him $1 million.
For which? I'm sorry.
For Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, he was offered $1 million.
Oh, Rocky. Oh, for Rocky. I don't know what Stallone was offered, but I know they offered to make his movie, and he said, "I need to star in it," and they let him star in it. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty good offer. We'll make your movie, and you can star in it. So, yeah, as far as how much money he got, I don't know. I don't know. That sounds like a lot of money for that time, but I'm not sure. Maybe he did.
What would be the average amount today? When people are selling scripts, what's the average amount people are selling them for?
Well, if you go to the WGA, I mean, they'll tell you what the minimum amounts are. So that's a guideline you can use. Whether you're WGA or not, the WGA will tell you what a screenplay, what the base price, starting price is. But studios don't spend. They usually option. They don't purchase screenplays. They option them, and they do like a one these days it's changed because they used to do full, like 36-month option or whatever. Now they'll option something for 18 months, and if it doesn't happen, they abandon it. It's like it's either happening or it's not. They don't spend years and years and years anymore. They can't do business like that. It costs too much money to do business that way. So that's actually a good way Hollywood's changed, I guess. Yeah.
I'll tell you someone I love as a screenwriter. I looked into the two guys that wrote Hacksaw Ridge as the screenplay. Both phenomenal. Forget their names.
Yeah. Well, we had a number of writers on it. And they all didn't get credited. In fact, and so that's an interesting process. But so we started with one writer, then we went to another writer, then we had the production done with another writer. So it was three separate, writers. So that's the process. But
one of my favorites, bit like yourself with films, you can't say one. I'd never cap myself to one. Shane Black.
Yeah, I love Shane. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I met Shane. Shane's a lot of fun. He's a lot of fun.
One of my favorite ever films is The Last Boy Scout.
Oh, when it came out, it was a disaster. Total failure. And yeah, dialogue, it's written great. Yeah.
Cult classic. I believe Shane was involved in Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, he wrote Lethal Weapon.
Predator.
I think he did. Yeah, I think he worked on Predator. Yeah.
Oh, what a guy! No, he's very, very impressive. I've looked on Instagram. I don't think he goes on there. I don't think he's really on social media. He's very elusive. Very elusive. He keeps himself to himself. It feels that way, and I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I'd love to have a conversation with him because he writes the films that I love. If someone could almost write what you would love to watch if you wasn't writing it yourself. I rate him that high.
Yes. Shane made a movie called LA. I want to say it's called LA Story, but that's not the title. No. It's a movie. Robert Downey's in it. I love this movie. Oh gosh, it's not one of his better known films. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but anyway, I can't. But Downey's in it, and it was made. He made it like 10 years ago, maybe longer. Oh, what the heck is the name of that movie? It's so great. But you know what? By the way, you asked me about what makes a great screenplay, and I think Shane Black is a perfect example of something else maybe that I didn't mention, and that is the voice of an original writer. That's what really gets executives, right? They read like 2 pages, and if there's a voice coming through, immediately hooked. And Shane is a writer that has a really strong voice. So if you read his screenplays, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's almost like he has an attitude that you'll pick up on. And it's great because it's a point of view. And that's what we want. We want people with interesting points of view, unique points of view.
Was it Iron Man?
No, it was right before he did the first Iron Man.
So, as a writer, his credits.
Sorry. Shane directed the second or third Iron Man, I believe. But wait. Sorry, did he direct the first one? I get it mixed up because I met Robert on Charlie Bartlett. Then Robert met Shane on this movie I'm talking about. And then Shane did Iron Man. So I forget sort of the trajectory of it. But that's how Robert, I think, was in Iron Man, was because he worked with Shane. Yeah.
He's a master.
A master.
Yeah. I would listen to him so close.
Well, reach out to Shane. I spent a weekend with him in Chicago. We did a seminar in Chicago. So he had agreed to talk to young screenwriters, new screenwriters. And boy, was he a trip. He was great. I loved him. Fantastic.
It's been unbelievable speaking to you, Steve.
Thank you.
Tell you what, I can see why you are where you are. It takes that sacrifice. It takes that flow. and it takes going out to get it. Thank you ever so much for coming on the Be Seen podcast. And I wish you all the success with your next movie, with the first alien encounter. Thank you.
Well, all the thanks goes to you, and an excellent interview. And I appreciate it when person who's interviewing me, they have some good questions and some things that allow me to kind of open up and talk about all of these, little, I don't know, you call them tricks or little things that I know that have really helped me take it to the next level. So I hope everybody's enjoyed it. And it's been absolutely my pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. So everybody, have a lovely time where you are. This is Steve Longi. Peace out. Be seen.